Okay, so let's move into the four-part processing system. So this is Seidenberg and McClelland. And when I teach the four-part processing system, I do teach it a little bit differently in that I reference this as my lesson plan for good instruction. It was designed to demonstrate the regions and the processing that happens in the brain as we are reading text, all the things that are happening in this left side of the brain here. But I have found that when I use this now as my lesson plan, I can ensure I'm tapping into all of these regions in the brain. And the important thing to know about the four-part processing system is that it is a bottom-up approach. We start with building that strong foundation in phonology and orthography, and then we move our way up. And so it's really important that we recognize that we have to start down here and then move upwards in order to build fluency, which ultimately, when I talk to teachers, we want fluent readers, right? That's what we're looking for. We want fluent readers, but we don't get fluent readers by just doing multiple reads of passages. That's not how we develop fluency. That's one way of developing fluency once our students have started to master the code, but we build fluency by ensuring that there's a strong relationship between phonology and orthography, but then also that my students can develop meaning for the words that they're able to decode, and then moving on up to using those words in context. And so it's really important that we tap into all of these processing systems when we teach. So I'm going to show you this in a larger graphic here, and I'm going to talk you through it. So let's start at the bottom because, again, bottom-up approach. So at the bottom, I have the phonological processor, which is all about the sounds. And like a muscle system in our body, we have to strengthen each of these processing systems in our brain through practice. So we have to kind of work each of them in order to make sure that they get practice and they are working well. And I'll use the analogy here of my own son. So my son is, he's really into fitness and sports, but unfortunately all of his athletic events, you know, baseball, soccer, everything has been canceled. And he's really struggling with that because he's used to going, you know, 3-4 times a week and working out in his conditioning and then running at practices and practicing all of these particular skills. So what we've done is we've had to build a weight room in the basement so that he can practice all of these things. But he has to practice specific muscle systems, right? He's got to weight train with specific muscle systems, which I don't do anything that resembles working out. So I'm really the first person to use this analogy, but I'm going to go with it. Similarly, in our brain, we have to work the different systems in our brain, and we have to give them exercise as well in order to make for great readers. So here we go. Starting with phonology, which is all about sounds, I strengthen my phonological processor, which is in my temporal and frontal lobes. So between the two here, my temporal and frontal lobes really deal with phonology. And those are the speech sounds in our language. So going down and practicing those individual phonemes. So articulation, placement and manner, how we make the sounds, but also any of our oral language. Or the difference, for example, when I'm listening to someone talk and at the end of their sentence, their voice goes up a little bit, I might know that that means it's a question versus whereas their voice goes down, it's going to be a statement at the end. So the inflection and the tone in our voice is part of phonology as well, in addition to going down to that little phonemic awareness level where we're dealing with the individual phonemes. So the phonological processor is strengthened by practicing phonemic awareness. So when I do drills like I say cane, but instead of say now we get rain. Say magnify, say it again, but don't say the mag. It's just nify. Say yam, say it again, but don't say yeah. It's just am. So we strengthen this processing system in our brain by doing phonemic awareness. So whether you're using Hegarty Phonemic Awareness Curriculum, you're doing these Kilpatrick 1-minute drills, we need to strengthen this system in our students. We need to strengthen this part of our brains. So for my struggling readers, I might need to have additional phonemic awareness interventions, but we need to, but for all readers in core instruction, kindergarten through second grade especially, we're doing phonemic awareness every day. Okay, moving over. Next to phonemic awareness, I've got this, next to the phonological processor, sorry, I've got this orthographic processor. And the orthographic processor is all about print. The orthographic processor processes each and every letter. It's our memory for all of those letters. It's our reading input and our writing output. In fact, when it comes to strengthening the orthographic processor, which is back here in the brain's letterbox in the occipital lobe, so this is right here in the occipital lobe, the brain's letterbox processes each and every letter. So the signal comes in through the eyes, it comes back here, and then it goes, oh, that's a letter, it sends it to the brain's letterbox where we take in each and every letter. When that happens, when we take in each of those letters in the orthographic processor, my brain is going to then connect back to the phonological processor and say, okay, wait a minute, what are some of those sounds? And it might combine some of the letters. For example, in the word charge, we might say, oh, CH. I'm going to take those two letters together and I'm going to make ch, 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 and those two go together. So that's this conversation that happens between orthographic and phonological. Now, how do we strengthen the orthographic processor? I strengthen the orthographic processor really through handwriting. Handwriting is a wonderful way to strengthen that. So I'm so excited that Ohio has brought back handwriting guidelines. And William Van Cleve, his session on handwriting should be hitting YouTube soon. I'm so excited. He did a session for the Ohio Department of Education Literacy Academy. I can't wait until it hits YouTube so that we can all go back and watch it together. We strengthen orthography, our orthographic processing system, through handwriting instruction daily, absolutely daily. We need a brain graphic for this. Yes, you were right. And honestly, I did a session at the Literacy Academy on how the brain reads, aligning it to this 4-part processing system. It should be hitting YouTube soon. And I promise it will be coming very, very soon to YouTube so that you can see the brain graphic to go with that. For now, I do have my brain right here. It's kind of hard to see, but I can kind of show you. So on my brain, my phonological processor is happening here in my temporal lobe, but it's also happening up here in my frontal lobe. So it's happening in 2 parts, but all on the left side of the brain. Phonological processing is happening in temporal and frontal lobe. But my orthographic processor is back here in the brain's letterbox, back in the border of the temporal and occipital lobe. And the brain's letterbox is where we visually, this signal comes in through my eyes. And Stanislaw Dehaene talks about this too. It comes in, and then in the occipital lobe, our brain says, oh, that's a letter, and it sends the signal immediately to then the brain's letterbox. And that's where we then process that and say, okay, I need to map that to specific sounds. So there's this connection between the 2 of them, right? I need to map that to these sounds in order to then determine the word and then get meaning from that particular word. But we strengthen this processing system through handwriting because there is a visual component to the orthography for learning each of those letters. And handwriting then taps into the parietal lobe up here. So this parietal lobe, handwriting adds that kinesthetic piece to tap into the parietal lobe. Okay. So we want to build that strong foundation between phonology and orthography and their communication between each other. And then we move up and we move into meaning. So as our brain is processing, we've taken this word C-H-A-R-G-E, we've gone ch-r-j, and we say, okay, the word is charge. Now I'm going to think about, okay, I know this word charge, and I'm thinking about all the different meanings of the word charge. Right? So I'm thinking about all these different meanings I know for charge. And in addition, and that's why I love this bi-directional arrow here, meaning is really strongly related to context, and context is strongly related to meaning. Because I have to think about the different contexts I've used. So that's where my background knowledge comes in, right? All the contexts where I've used the word charge, maybe I've read it, I've heard it said. And so we have this back and forth bi-directional communication here between this context and meaning. And so we strengthen my meaning processor by teaching vocabulary. and by giving kids more vocabulary, which, by the way, when we teach them vocabulary, they're strengthening their phonological processor because they hear the words, but then their meaning processor because they learn the meanings of all of these different words. But they're also strengthening their context processor because we use those words in context. And then the context processor is strengthened whenever we're building background knowledge. Background knowledge strengthens my context processor. It is absolutely critical for strengthening it. Going back to the work of Hirsch and that Wexler's been reporting on, and that Willingham has been talking about, Shanahan has been talking about, we strengthen background knowledge every time we read complex texts, and we are using text sets around themes and units of study in order to build that knowledge in the students. Okay, so I'm going to give you a practical application. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's switch cameras here for a second. Oh, maybe I'm going to switch cameras. There it goes.